Hello, my name is Daniel Quison, and today I will be explaining a food principle for rice, or sushi specifically. Now you may be asking what food principle would apply to raw fish? Perhaps catching the fish? Maybe slicing and manicuring the fish? Perhaps you can come up with a food science principle for that. Or maybe even the act of storing the fish by freezing and wrapping it, which definitely be a food principle. But I would think that would be the easy way out. Actually, sushi has nothing to do with raw fish. Well, it has a lot to do with raw fish, but the actual definition of sushi is seasoned vinegar rice. Many of us have friends that say, I don't eat real sushi, so I can't go to dinner with you, or I won't go out to eat. Well, you can put a piece of fried chicken on seasoned vinegar rice and take it from the guy who's been selling sushi for over 15 years. That is absolutely sushi. Now, the act of seasoning and putting vinegar to the rice, this act of preservation specifically is called acidification. Now, I will explain this very shortly here. Other examples of food preservation I would like to explain would be there's drying, there's vacuum sealing, you can can your food, you can cure your food with sodium nitrates like with meats, which is essentially really salty, which is almost the opposite of the principle that I will be explaining today. You can freeze your food, you can smoke your food, and one of my favorites, adding sulfur dioxide to wine to help preserve the shelf life of wine so it can last longer. The point of preservation, preserving your food anyways, is to prevent the growth of harmful bacteria as well as to slow the oxidation of fats in meats. Now, with acidification or seasoned vinegared rice anyways, you have to know a little bit about the history of sushi. Now, with a lot of things ancient, and especially with food, there's a lot of legend and folklore and mysterious around sushi. There are some common stories, like there was an old lady once upon a time who used to hide her rice from the birds, so she'd cover it with salt, but the osprey would still get to it and leave fish scraps. And the rice would eventually ferment, and she thought it tasted great. Some people say that fishermen in Japan would wrap their fish when they would be out there on weeks on end, and this would help preserve it. Some people say it was actually the opposite, and it was used by pastoral farmers. Now, some historians will even claim the Chinese actually developed sushi. Sometime in the early 4th century, when they basically took raw fish, cooked rice in salt, and then fermented it. Now, perhaps you can say the Chinese influenced the idea of preserving fish with rice. However, fermentation is different than acidification. Therefore, I don't think I would give the claim to the Chinese. You're welcome, Japan. Now, to explain acidification, it is very simply the act of turning a solution to less than 7 on a scale of 1 to 14, simply by adding an acid. Now, you would have to, I can very briefly explain the idea of pH. Now, all living organisms have an affinity or an ideal pH that they want to exist or live in. Some of my favorite plants is Buxus, or this boxwood plant, likes really, really high pH, anything above 7, because 7 would be neutral. This Caprices sempervirens, or this Italian cypress anyways, likes really acidic pH. Now, pH is essentially just measuring the strength of an acid or a base in the solution, again, on a scale of 1 to 14. One more time, 7 would be neutral. Now, Zoran Sorensen, the gentleman who came up with the term pH, never fully explained what the P stood for. Some people will infer that chemists will use P in subscript versus Q in test solution versus reference solution, but again, that is just inferred. Essentially, acids donate a proton and bases accept a proton. Some common examples of Acids would be lactic acid in milk, or citric acid in lemon, or acetic acid in vinegar, the example we'll be using today. Bases, on the other hand, alkalines or salts, they feel really, really slippery. They neutralize acid. Do know one thing about both of them. The farther you get away from 7, the closer you get to 14, and the closer you get to 0 or 1, know this. It will be very harmful. It can burn you, it can blow up, and it can kill you. It's the most important part you need to know. Now, let's get to the fun part in making sushi. Very simply, what I've done for you today is I have had the rice prepared ahead of time. That would just simply take too long and be very boring to watch. But there are 2 very simple methods in making rice. The easiest method would be simply using a rice cooker. Now, depending on who you talk to and what family they come from, many people have many different interpretations on how to cook rice. Very generally speaking, you want to use 2 parts water to 1 part dry rice. Now, there is an exception. With the case of cooking sushi rice, you do want to use a little bit less water since you'll be adding back with the vinegar solution. You don't want it too wet and too soggy. But in order to cook it on the rice pot, very simply, I have a cup of dry white rice. So, I have a cup and a half of water. I would simply pour it in here, put it on the stove, bring it to a boil. As soon as it starts boiling, I add the dry rice, turn it all the way down to low, let that cover 15 to 20 minutes. After the time is up, you simply turn off the heat and let it sit for another 5, and you're done. Even easier, in the case of a rice cooker, you add the same parts water and rice, pour it in here, drop it in the cooker, plug it in, and you turn it on and you press a button. Done. That's what we've done today. One thing you do want to keep in mind when you are making your sushi rice, you do want it to be warm. That'll help mix the solution with the rice much easier. First thing you want to do is actually prepare your vinegar solution first. 1 cup vinegar, rice wine vinegar specifically. This you can get at any common grocery store, Smith's, Albertsons. I actually specifically went to Albertsons, which I normally would not, just for the sake of this video, just to show you how simple it is to procure these ingredients. So once again, let's just keep in mind plain rice wine vinegar. 1 cup of that. We have pretty standard fine granulated sugar. 1/2 cup there. Very simply, kosher sea salt. 1/4 cup there. Now, often sushi chefs will add an ingredient called kombu, which is a type of kelp, very thin, about the size of a dollar bill, and it will essentially dissolve. That was not available, and it's not 100% necessary. So I simply made it with the salt, sugar, and the vinegar. Once you have all the ingredients into the bowl as you see, you simply whisk until it is dissolved. It's only take a few seconds. Okay. Now the portion of rice to vinegar, 4 parts rice to 1 part vinegar. So in this case today, we'll be using 2 cups of rice. To a 1/2 cup of vinegar. This is a little short. You just very simply want to fold the vinegar solution into the rice. You don't want to really smash it too much. You want to kind of just cut through it and lace through it. And one thing you will know is cooking rice is never consistent. Sometimes it will be a little bit more wet or a little bit more dry. So you may want to add or remove as necessary. And I can just tell by looking at this, it's a little bit too wet for my taste. Just add a little bit more rice. Minus the 15 minutes that you didn't see of me cooking the rice, you can make sushi less than 5 minutes. Notice I have absolutely no raw fish. I do have a really sweet Japanese sashimi neck, however. Japanese still would be the way to go. Very simply layer in your desired amount of rice. Today I'm going to be making cucumber avocado hand roll. I like to roll it with a little bit of a taper, just for appearance. Sushi. Now, for those of you who don't eat raw fish, remember, once again, from a guy who's been selling sushi for over 15 years, seasoned vinegared rice is the definition of sushi, and the point of it is to preserve the fish, or at least it used to be. Now it just tastes really good. So, next time you go to your favorite all-you-can-eat restaurant, think seasoned vinegared rice. Have a great night.